I stood in the Lisbon hotel lobby watching the card reader flash red. It felt like a slap. Minutes ago, my boss texted me saying the company card was canceled and to find my own way home. I only had $58 in my wallet. They did not just want to fire me, they wanted a scapegoat. However, they forgot that the person they left stranded held the only key to the deal they desperately needed. My name is Madeline Lee. I am 34 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I was a respected coordination manager for Bracken and Rowe Travel Goods. Now, I was just a woman standing in a well-lit hotel lobby in Lisbon, watching a credit card terminal blink a mocking red light. The receptionist, a young Portuguese man with kind eyes and an impeccably pressed uniform, looked at me with profound pity. He lowered his voice, trying to spare me the indignity of the guests standing in the queue behind me hearing the news. "I am afraid the card has been declined again." "Ms. Lee," he said softly, "the system says it has been reported lost or stolen. Do you have another method of payment for the incidentals and the extension of your stay?" My fingers felt numb as I gripped the black plastic card. It was the corporate American Express, the platinum lifeline that had sustained me through 3 weeks of grueling negotiations in a foreign country. It was not lost. It was not stolen. It was in my hand. "Let me make a call," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was too calm. It was the voice of someone who did not yet realize the floor had vanished beneath her feet. I stepped away from the marble counter, dragging my carry-on suitcase over the polished tile. The wheels rumbled like distant thunder, a harsh sound in the quiet sophistication of the hotel. I pulled my phone from my trench coat pocket. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications that had arrived while I was arguing with the front desk. The first was from the airline. Flight DL402. To New York, JFK. Cancelled. Passenger manifest updated. Ticket voided by purchaser. My stomach dropped. I felt a cold sweat prickle along the back of my neck. They had canceled my flight home. It was not a delay. It was a voided ticket. Then I saw the text message. It was from Derek Voss. Derek was the director of supply chain, a man who wore Italian loafers that cost more than my car, and who believed leadership meant screaming until people stopped arguing. I opened the message. There was no greeting. There was no professional preamble. Contract terminated. Figure it out. Useless. I stared at the words. The cruelty was breathtaking in its efficiency. 3 short sentences to erase 5 years of loyalty. He did not just fire me, he stranded me. We were 3,000 miles from the corporate headquarters in Chicago. I was in Portugal, a country where I knew exactly 2 people, and both of them were business associates I was supposed to be managing. I needed money. I switched apps to my personal banking dashboard. I had savings, not much, but enough to buy a one-way economy ticket back to the States and pay for a cheap motel tonight. I logged in, my thumb trembling slightly against the glass. The screen loaded. My balance was visible, but the numbers were grayed out. A red banner stretched across the top of the interface. Account frozen. Reason pending external investigation regarding reimbursement fraud. The air left my lungs. It was a physical blow. I staggered slightly. Bumping into a large potted fern, a businessman passing by gave me a sharp look, annoyed by my clumsiness. He did not know that I had just been murdered, not my body, but my life, my identity. Reimbursement fraud. The words burned into my retinas. I understood immediately what was happening. This was not just about cutting costs. This was not a layoff. This was a frame job. Derek Voss was not just discarding me. He was pinning something on me. He had frozen my corporate access, canceled my safe passage home, and flagged my personal assets as proceeds of theft to lock me down. He wanted me stranded, broke, and unable to fight back while he spun the narrative back home. I opened my wallet. My hands were shaking now, a violent tremor that I could not suppress. I counted the bills. 2 20-euro notes, 1 10, 3 coins, plus a stray $20 bill tucked behind my driver's license. Roughly $58 in total purchasing power. $58. That was the sum of my existence. It would not buy a plane ticket. It would not buy a hotel room in Lisbon during the peak season. It might buy me a dinner and a ride to the airport to sleep on a bench, provided security did not kick me out. I looked up. The lobby was bustling. People were checking in, laughing, dragging luggage, complaining about jet lag. They were safe. They had homes to go to. They had jobs. I looked down at the leather portfolio tucked into the front pocket of my suitcase. It was heavy, made of thick, premium cardstock. Inside was the draft of the Cork Composite Exclusive Supply Agreement. I pulled it out, needing to hold something tangible. This document was the reason I was here. It was a deal worth tens of millions of dollars over the next 5 years. It secured a proprietary material that would revolutionize our entire lightweight luggage line. I had spent 3 weeks in dusty workshops and humid offices, drinking espresso with Mateus Rocha, listening to stories about his grandchildren, and slowly, painfully rebuilding a relationship that Derek had almost destroyed with his arrogance. I flipped to page 42, the signature page. It was blank, but above it, under the clause labeled Primary Liaison and Key Contact, my name was typed in bold letters. Madeline Lee. Marius had insisted on it. He trusted me. He did not trust Bracken and Rowe, and he certainly did not trust Derek Voss. The contract stated that all quality control approvals and initial fulfillment milestones had to be verified by the key contact. I was the key contact. A new email notification pinged. It was an automated system alert, likely sent to me in error because the IT department had not fully scrubbed my distribution list access yet. It was a copy of a memo sent to the legal department and human resources. Subject: immediate action required. Employee M. Lee status: suspected of gross inflation of vendor expenses. Initiate remote wipe of devices. Flag for immediate termination with cause. Prepare liability statement for clients. They were moving fast. They were painting a picture of a rogue employee who was stealing from the company and the vendors. By the time I managed to scrape together enough money to call home, everyone would already know I was a thief. My reputation would be ashes. I would never work in this industry again. Panic clawed at my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to the receptionist and beg for help. I wanted to curl up in a ball on the expensive rug and cry until someone fixed it. But then I thought of Sadie. My daughter was 7 years old. She was waiting for me. I had promised her I would be home for her birthday. If I broke down now, if I let them crush me, I would be returning to her as a failure. A woman with a criminal record and no future. I would not be able to pay our rent. I would not be able to buy her school shoes. The panic did not leave, but it changed. It hardened. It turned into something cold and heavy in my gut. I looked at the phone again. Derek expected me to beg. He expected me to fire back a dozen frantic texts asking why, pleading for him to turn the card back on. He expected me to be the victim he had treated me as for the last 3 years. I opened the message thread with Derek. I typed 2 words. Understood. I hit send. I put the phone in my pocket. I did not look at the receptionist again. I did not apologize. I zipped the leather portfolio back into my bag. It was not just paper anymore. It was ammunition. As long as I had the physical copy of the negotiated terms, and as long as Mateus Rocha had not signed anything digital from Derek, I held the leverage. Derek thought he had cut my lifeline. He forgot that he had left me holding the anchor. I walked out of the hotel. The automatic doors slid open, and the humid night air of Lisbon hit me. It smelled of salt and grilled fish and exhaust fumes. It was the smell of a city that did not care if I lived or died. I gripped the handle of my suitcase. I had $58. I had no room. I had no flight. I walked past the line of waiting taxis. I could not afford them. I walked 3 blocks to the public transit stop. The schedule was posted on a peeling yellow sign. There was a night bus that ran north, out toward the industrial districts where the tourists never went. It cost €4.50. I checked the time. It was 8 o'clock at night. The factory would be closed. But I knew where Mateus and his wife lived. They lived in a small house attached to the main workshop compound. It was unprofessional to show up at a business partner's home in the middle of the night with luggage, dragged from a bus stop, smelling of travel and desperation. It was insane. But Mateus Rocha was the only person in this entire country who had looked me in the eye and treated me like a human being. He was the only one who knew the value of the work I had done. I stood on the curb, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows against the pavement. I was done being the polite employee. I was done being the quiet coordinator who fixed everyone's mistakes. They wanted to leave me in the dark, fine. I would operate in the dark. The bus rounded the corner, its brakes screeching. I stepped forward. I was not going home. Not yet. I was going to war. The bus rattled over the cobblestones, the suspension groaning with every pothole, vibrating through the thin soles of my shoes. I rested my forehead against the cold glass of the window, watching the outskirts of Lisbon blur into streaks of amber and charcoal. The vibration made my teeth ache, but it was a grounding sensation. It kept me from drifting into the sheer terror of what was happening. Instead, my mind drifted backward, across the Atlantic, to the reason I was sitting on this bus in the first place. I thought of Sadie. My daughter is 7 years old. She has a smile that takes up her whole face and a stubborn streak that she inherited entirely from me. Her father. A man whose name feels like a ghost in my mouth. Left before she was old enough to memorize the sound of his voice. He left us with a leased sedan, 2 months of unpaid electric bills, and a silence that I had to fill with double shifts and sheer force of will. For the last 6 years, it has just been the two of us. We are a closed circuit, a team. But being a single mother in America is not just about love. It is an exercise in logistics and financial terror. It is waking up at 5 a.m. to make lunches before the sun is up. It is calculating the cost of a fever, knowing that a sick day for her means a docked day for me, which means the grocery budget gets switched from fresh produce to frozen pasta. That was why I stayed at Bracken & Rowe Travel Goods. To the outside world, Bracken & Rowe is the pinnacle of luxury. They sell suitcases that cost $2,000 and carry-on bags made of Italian leather that smells like old money. Working there carried a certain prestige. When I told people I was the coordination manager, they would nod impressively, imagining me jet-setting to Milan and Tokyo, sipping champagne in first-class lounges. The reality was unglamorous and gritty. I was the engine room. While the creative directors drew sketches on napkins and the sales team took 3-hour lunches, I was the one on the phone with a zipper manufacturer in Yiwu at 3 a.m, negotiating the tensile strength of a brass clasp. I was the one who knew that the tannery in Florence closed for all of August, so we had to front-load orders in July. I was good at it. I did not treat our vendors like vending machines. I learned the names of their children. I remembered when their local holidays were. I knew that Marco, our leather supplier, had a bad hip, so I never pushed for rush orders when it rained. I built capital with human beings, not just spreadsheets. That was my value. I smoothed the road so the company could drive its luxury car without blowing a tire. But in the glass-walled offices of our Chicago headquarters, value was measured differently. It was measured by people like Derek Voss. Derek is 47 years old. He became the director of supply chain 6 months ago, not because he understands logistics, but because his uncle sits on the board of investors. Derek is a man who takes up too much space in a room. He wears suits that are too shiny and a Swiss chronograph watch that costs more than my annual rent. He likes to lean back in his ergonomic chair, hands behind his head, and tell us about his weekend on his boat, while we scramble to fix shipping errors he caused by ignoring emails. I remember a meeting just 2 months ago. I had come in 10 minutes late because Sadie had an ear infection and the urgent care center was slow. I had emailed ahead. I had my laptop open in the waiting room, working the entire time. When I walked into the conference room, Derek stopped talking. He looked at his watch, then at me. "Nice of you to join us, Madeline," he said, flashing a smile that did not reach his eyes. I apologized and took my seat. Opening my notebook, I tried to pivot the conversation to the leather yield issues, but he cut me off. He leaned forward, tapping his pen on the polished mahogany table. "You know, you are lucky to have this job, Madeline," he said. The room went quiet. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Most people in your situation, with the Personal baggage. They do not get opportunities at a firm like this. We are very flexible with you. He meant Sadie. He meant my life as a mother, to Derek, and to half the executive team. My child was a defect. She was a reason I could not go to the happy hours at the rooftop bars where the real decisions were made. She was the reason I was the first one out the door at 5 o'clock sharp to beat the daycare late fees. Because I was not bonding over scotch and cigars. I was invisible. I was the unpolished, tired woman in the sensible shoes who cleaned up the messes, while they were the visionaries who created them. I swallowed the insult. I always swallowed it. I smiled tight and nodded. Thank you. Derek, I appreciate the flexibility. Now, about the leather yields. I took the disrespect because I had to. I took it for the health insurance that covered Sadie's asthma inhalers. I took it for the rent on our 2-bedroom apartment in a school district that was safe enough for her to walk on the sidewalk. I took it because the thought of being unemployed, of dipping into the terrifyingly small emergency fund, kept me awake at night staring at the ceiling fan. But fear breeds habits. Early on in my career, I learned that people like Derek never take the blame. When a shipment is late, it is never because they forgot to sign the purchase order. It is because the coordinator didn't remind them. When a budget is blown, it is never because they demanded first-class travel. It is because the staff didn't economize. So, I became a hoarder of evidence. It started small, a saved email here, a screenshot there, but over the years, it became a ritual, almost a religion. Every time Derek gave a verbal instruction that sounded risky, I would send a follow-up email. Just to confirm our conversation this morning, you would like me to bypass the standard quality check to meet the Tuesday deadline. Please let me know if I have misunderstood. He would usually reply with a vague, yes, proceed, unaware that he was signing a confession. I kept everything. I scanned every receipt for every coffee, every taxi, every ream of paper. I had a flatbed scanner at home, and every Sunday night, after Sadie went to sleep, I would digitize the week's physical trail. I organized them into folders on a private cloud drive that was completely separate from the company servers. My friends called it paranoid. They told me I needed to relax, but they did not understand the math of my life. One mistake, one lost receipt, one undocumented approval. That was the difference between safety and ruin. If I lost a receipt for a $500 client dinner, the finance department would dock it from my paycheck. That $500 was the grocery budget for the month. It was the new winter coat Sadie needed. It was the car insurance payment. I could not afford to be casual. I could not afford to trust. I remember the day Derek handed me the assignment for Portugal. He called me into his office, not bothering to look up from his phone. "We need to lock down the cork composite deal," he said. "The Portuguese vendor is getting twitchy. They are threatening to walk. Go over there and fix it. I asked for the travel budget code." He scribbled something on a sticky note and flicked it across the desk. "Do whatever it takes. Madeline," he said. "Just get the signature. We are bleeding out here." I picked up the note. I looked at him. "Is there a cap on the incidental expenses?" I asked. The last time we did a rush trip, finance gave me a hard time about the car service. Derek waved his hand dismissively. "I am authorizing it. Just keep the receipts. You are authorized to use the Platinum card for all vendor-related entertainment and logistics. We need them happy. Win them over." I nodded. "Can I get that in writing?" I asked. He sighed. A loud, theatrical exhalation of air. "I will send an email. Madeline, Jesus, you are so rigid. That is your problem. You have no flow." He did send the email. 2 lines. Madeline Lee authorized for full travel and entertainment expenses for Portugal trip. Priority is contract execution. I printed that email. I saved it as a PDF. I took a photo of it on my phone. And then I packed my bags, kissed Sadie goodbye, and told her I would be back before she turned 8. Sitting on the bus now, with the Portuguese night rushing by, I felt a phantom weight in my pocket where my phone was. I had the evidence. I had years of it. I had the receipts, the timestamps, the passive-aggressive directives. Derek Voss thought I was just a desperate single mother who would crumble the moment the paycheck stopped. He thought I was weak because I was quiet. He thought I was trapped because I had a child. He was right about the fear. I was terrified. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But he was wrong about the weakness. You do not raise a child alone in a city that wants to eat you alive by being weak. You do it by being meticulous. You do it by keeping score. The bus slowed, the air brakes hissing violently. We were entering the industrial district. The streetlights were fewer here, the shadows longer. I stood up, gripping the handle of my suitcase. My knuckles were white. I was not just fighting for a job anymore. I was fighting for the 7-year-old girl waiting for me in Chicago. I was fighting for every time he had looked at his watch while I spoke. I was fighting for every time he told me I was lucky. I stepped off the bus into the cool, dark air. The smell of cork dust and pine resin hung in the atmosphere. I knew the way to the house. I had studied the maps. I adjusted my coat, took a breath that tasted of ozone and resolve, and began to walk. I had my receipts. Now I just needed to survive long enough to use them. The crisis at Bracken and Row did not start with a bang. It started with a silence. For 2 weeks, the daily production updates from the Rocha workshop in Portugal had ceased. No emails, no shipping manifests, no invoices. In the supply chain world, silence is louder than screaming. It usually means the vendor has found a better buyer, or worse, they have been insulted to the point of a strike. I knew the Rocha account was fragile. It was the linchpin of our upcoming Ecolux line, a collection that was supposed to save the fiscal year. The material was a cork composite, lightweight, waterproof, and sustainable. It was brilliant, but the owner, Mateus Rocha, was an old-world craftsman who believed business was conducted with handshakes and mutual respect, 2 things Derek Voss seemed biologically incapable of offering. I was at my desk, cross-referencing shipping codes. When the glass door to Derek's office swung open, it hit the stopper with a violent thud that made half the floor jump. "Madeline, in here, now." He did not wait for a response. He turned his back and walked to his window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. I grabbed my notepad and followed. Closing the door behind me, the room smelled of expensive cologne and stress sweat. A file folder landed on the desk. It slid across the polished surface and stopped inches from my hand. "Fix it," Derek said. He did not turn around. I opened the folder. It was a printout of an email chain. The subject line read, "Termination of relationship, final notice." I scanned the contents. My stomach tightened. It was bad. Derek had tried to renegotiate the unit price down by 15% after the initial agreement, citing market fluctuations that did not exist. When Mateus refused, Derek had sent a reply that called the workshop provincial and suggested their quality control was barely adequate for a discount retailer. It was a bridge-burning email, and now the bridge was on fire, and we were trapped on the wrong side. "They are stopping production on Friday," I said. Looking up, "This says they are allocating our production slots to a competitor." Derek turned around. His face was flushed. "They are bluffing. It is a negotiation tactic." These small European shops always play the victim card. "Mateus Rocha does not bluff," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have spoken to him. He values honor. You insulted his work. Derek, he's walking away on principle." Derek slammed his hand on the desk. "I do not care about his principles. I care about the shareholders meeting next quarter. If we do not have that cork line, the stock tanks. And if the stock tanks, heads roll. And I guarantee you, Madeline, mine will not be the first one to hit the floor." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "You are going to Lisbon," he said. "Tonight, you are going to go over there. You are going to apologize. You are going to buy them dinner, and you are not coming back until that contract is signed and the production line is moving again." I looked at the calendar on his wall. It was mid-October. How long, I asked. Derek shrugged. 3 weeks, 5 weeks, as long as it takes. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Derek," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Sadie's birthday is on the 12th of November. Her school play is the day before. She has the lead role, I promised her." He looked at me with a blank expression, as if I had just spoken in a language he did not understand. So he asked, "So, I cannot be gone for 5 weeks indefinitely. I have a 7-year-old child. I can go for a week to smooth things over. But I cannot relocate there. Can't we send Mark? Or maybe I can do the initial meetings and handle the rest via video conference?" Derek laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Mark is an idiot. You are the only one who likes these people. You are the people person, right? That is what we pay you for, to handle the feelings." He leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk, invading my personal space. "Look, Madeline, you want to talk about your kid? Fine. Let's talk about her. Does she like eating? Does she like living in an apartment with heat? Because if we lose this supplier, this department gets downsized. And you know who goes first. The single mom who needs flexibility for school plays." The cruelty was precise. He knew exactly where to cut. "Figure it out. Madeline," he said, straightening his tie, "your kid will survive missing a birthday. She won't survive her mother being unemployed in this economy." I walked out of his office with my legs feeling like lead. I went back to my cubicle and stared at the photo of Sadie pinned to the fabric wall. She was grinning, missing a front tooth, holding a pumpkin from last Halloween. I picked up the phone. My hand felt heavy. Calling my cousin Megan was always a last resort. Megan loved Sadie, but she had her own life, 3 cats, and a job as a paralegal that kept her busy, but I had no one else. My parents were gone, and Sadie's father was a ghost. "I can do it," Megan said, after I explained the situation. Her voice was sympathetic but strained. "But Maddie, 5 weeks. That is a long time. Sadie is going to be crushed." "I know," I whispered, shielding the phone with my hand so my coworkers wouldn't hear the break in my voice. "I know, Megan, but I have no choice. It is this or the unemployment line. I will transfer you money for groceries and everything else. I will video call every night." I hung up and started booking the flight. It felt like I was booking a sentence, not a trip. Later that afternoon, an hour before I was set to leave for O'Hare, the HR assistant dropped a document on my desk. "Travel advance and indemnity agreement," she said, popping gum. "Derek said you need to sign this before finance can release the funds." I looked at the paper. It was not the standard travel authorization form. It was 3 pages of dense legalese, single-spaced. I started to read. The language was aggressive. It spoke of conditional approval and personal liability for non-compliant expenditures. There was a paragraph about the employee assuming full responsibility for any costs deemed outside the scope of direct business necessity by the Oversight Committee. I frowned. "This looks different," I said. "Usually, it is just a per diem sign-off." The assistant shrugged. "New policy from legal. I guess everyone is signing them. Derek said if you don't sign it by 4 o'clock, the trip is unauthorized and you are AWOL." I looked at the clock. It was 3:50. My eyes scanned the text again. It felt like a trap. The wording was vague enough to be interpreted in a dozen different ways. Scope of direct business necessity. Who defined that was a dinner with a client necessary? Was a taxi to the factory necessary? In Derek's world, everything was necessary until the bill came due, and then it was an extravagance. But the alternative was refusing to go. And refusing to go meant being fired for insubordination. I was trapped in a pincer movement. On one side, the immediate threat of job loss. On the other, a vague legal threat that seemed standard enough to be ignored if everything went well. I convinced myself it was fine. I was careful. I kept receipts. I never spent money I couldn't justify. I was the queen of the paper trail. I would be fine. I picked up the black ballpoint pen. I signed my name at the bottom of the last page. Madeline Lee. The ink looked dark and permanent. I went home to pack. The apartment was quiet. Sadie was at school, and Megan would pick her up and bring her over later. I packed my suitcase with mechanical efficiency. Business suits. Comfortable shoes for the factory floor. My laptop. The adapter plugs. When Megan arrived with Sadie, the air in the room changed. Sadie ran to me, her backpack bouncing. "Mommy, look, I got an A on my spelling test." I hugged her. burying my face in her neck, smelling the scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dust. I held her tighter than usual. "That is amazing, baby," I said. "I am so proud of you." I sat her down on the sofa. This was the hard part. "Sadie, honey, Mommy has to go on a trip for work. A big trip." Her face fell immediately. "But you just got home," she said. "I know. This one is important. It is to Portugal. Remember we looked at it on the map? Is it far? Very far. Will you be back for my play?" she asked. Her eyes were wide, searching mine for the truth. I hesitated. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. But I could not tell her, "I don't know." I could not tell her, "My boss doesn't care about your play. I am going to try my very hardest." I said, "But my birthday. You have to be here for my birthday. We are going to make the unicorn cake." I took her small hands in mine. They were warm and sticky. "I promise," I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "I will be back before you blow out the candles. I promise. Sadie." She looked at me, weighing my words. Then she nodded, trusting me completely. "Okay, Mommy," that trust was the most painful thing I had ever felt. I hugged her one last time, whispered instructions to Megan, and walked out the door with my suitcase. The ride to the airport was a blur of gray highway and red taillights. As I sat in the departure lounge, watching the rain streak against the glass, I felt a deep, sick churning in my stomach. It wasn't fear of flying, it was a premonition. I had signed a document I didn't fully understand. I had left my daughter with a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, and I was flying 3,000 miles to clean up a mess made by a man who would throw me to the wolves to save a percentage point on a quarterly report. The boarding call came over the intercom. "Flight 402 to Lisbon. Now boarding zone 1. I stood up. I tightened my grip on my bag. I was going to fix this. I was going to get that signature, save the account, and get back to my daughter. I had to. Failure was not an option. I walked down the jet bridge, unaware that I was walking directly into a cage that Derek Voss had been building for me, bar by bar. From the moment he handed me that file, the door of the plane closed, sealing me in. The promise to Sadie lingered in my mind, echoing like a ghost. I promise. It was the last promise I would make as the woman I used to be. The woman who came back would be someone else entirely. Lisbon was not the city I had seen in travel magazines. For me, it was a grid of heat, exhaustion, and calculated frugality. I had booked a room at the Residencial Estrella, a faded yellow building in a neighborhood that tourists usually avoided. The room cost €60 a night. The air conditioning was a rattling box in the window that coughed more than it cooled, and the shower head sprayed water in every direction except down. I could have booked the Sheraton. The corporate policy technically allowed it, but the dense, threatening language of the indemnity agreement I had signed burned in the back of my mind. Direct business necessity. If Derek Voss decided later that a 4-star hotel was an unnecessary luxury, I would be liable for the bill. I could not risk a $2,000 charge hitting my personal account. So, I chose the bed with the lumpy mattress and the view of a brick wall. Every morning, I woke up at 6. Instead of calling a private car, I walked 4 blocks to the bus stop. I took the number 758 bus out to the industrial perimeter, a 45-minute ride that smelled of diesel and unwashed bodies. It was the implied order Derek had given me. Fix it, but don't cost me anything. The Rocha workshop was located at the end of a dusty road lined with eucalyptus trees. It was not a gleaming factory. It was a sprawling compound of corrugated metal and stone, surrounded by stacks of raw cork bark that looked like ancient, rugged armor. Mateus Rocha was 61 years old, but he moved with the heavy, deliberate strength of a man who had worked with his hands all his life. He had skin like tanned leather and eyes that were dark, intelligent, and currently very cold. On the first day, he barely looked at me. "You are the new messenger," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. His English was thick but precise. "Derek is too busy to come himself." I did not flinch. I stood my ground on the concrete floor, ignoring the layer of fine red dust coating my sensible pumps. Derek asked me to come because I am the one who handles the logistics. Mateus, I said, I am the one who knows the product. He scoffed. You are the one they send to be yelled at. He was right, of course, but I was not there to be a punching bag. I was there to be a bridge. For the first 3 days, we did not talk about the contract. I just shadowed him. I watched the process. I learned how they boiled the cork to expand the cells, how they sliced it into veneers thin as paper but strong as canvas. I met his wife, Inez. She was a small woman with sharp features and a gaze that felt like it was X-raying my soul. She managed the accounts and the workers, moving through the factory like a silent general. By the 4th day, the ice began to crack. We were sitting in the small break room, drinking espresso that was thick enough to chew. Look, Mateus, I said, putting down my cup. I know what happened in July. I know we pushed the delivery date up by 2 weeks without paying the rush fee. I know the invoice for the last shipment was paid 30 days late. He looked up, surprised. He had expected me to deny it. He had expected me to use corporate speak about processing errors. It was disrespectful. I continued. It put strain on your workers. It made you look bad to your sub-suppliers. I am not here to tell you that didn't happen. I am here to tell you how I'm going to stop it from happening again. I pulled out my laptop. I did not show him a slide deck from marketing. I showed him my own spreadsheets. I showed him a new production calendar that padded the lead times by 20%, giving his team breathing room. I showed him a tiered pricing structure that triggered automatic penalties if Bracken and Rowe paid late. This is not what Derek sent, Mateus said, tapping the screen. No, I said, this is what I drafted. If we agree on this, I will force them to sign it. He looked at me for a long time. Then he looked at Inez. She gave a barely perceptible nod. We spent the next week hammering out the details. It was grueling. We argued over fractions of a euro per square meter. We argued over shipping insurance, but it was an honest argument. There was no posturing. We were finding the middle ground where my company got a premium product and his company got security. We built a rhythm. I learned that Inez worried about their son who was studying in London. I learned that Mateus was terrified that the traditional cork industry was dying out, replaced by cheap plastics. They learned about Sadie. I showed them pictures of her in her Halloween costume. By the 2nd week, I wasn't just the American woman, I was Madeline. One evening, as the sun was setting and casting long orange shadows across the cork stacks, we finally reached the end of the draft. The terms were solid. The price was fair. It was a contract that would save the Ecolux line and secure the workshop's payroll for 3 years. I will have legal draw up the final version based on these terms, I said, feeling a wave of relief so strong it made me dizzy. I will send it to Derek for review. Mateus held up a hand. No, he said. My heart stopped. What? No, Derek, he said firmly. I don't understand. I stammered. He is the director. He has to sign. He can sign. Mateus said, but the relationship is with you. He leaned forward, his face serious. I want a clause, Madeline, a specific clause. It must say that all changes to the schedule, all approvals of quality, and all renegotiations must go through you, specifically you, in writing. He tapped the table with his index finger. If Derek calls me, I hang up. If he emails me, I delete it. I do not do business with him. I do business with you. If you leave the company, the contract is void. I stared at him. It was an extraordinary request. It was unheard of in corporate agreements to tie a multi-million-dollar deal to a mid-level manager. Matthias, I said carefully, they might not agree to that. It creates a liability for them. Then they do not get the cork, Inez said. She spoke from the doorway, her arms crossed. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of steel. We do not need their money that badly, she said, walking over to the table. She looked at me, her dark eyes softening slightly, but the resolve in them was terrifying. We survived before Bracken and Rowe. We will survive after, but we do not sign with people who do not know respect. You know respect. Madeline, that man does not. I realized then that this wasn't a negotiation tactic, it was a moral stance. They were handing me a weapon, though I don't think they realized how dangerous it was. They were making me the linchpin. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I will write it in. Key contact clause." I packed up my bag, my mind racing with how I was going to sell this to Derek. I would have to frame it as a cultural quirk, a demand from an eccentric old European artisan. Derek's ego would hate it, but his greed would accept it. I walked out of the office and into the cooling evening air to catch the last bus back to the city. As I walked down the gravel driveway, a black sedan pulled out from the side road. It was a sleek, electric rental. Far too nice for this neighborhood. It slowed down as it passed me. The window rolled down. A woman was sitting in the passenger seat. She was in her 40s, wearing a tailored blazer that screamed high competence. She didn't look like a tourist. She looked like a shark in human clothing. "Ms. Lee," she asked. I stopped, gripping the handle of my laptop bag. "Yes." She didn't smile. She just extended a hand through the open window and offered me a card. "We know you are doing all the work," she said, "and we know Derek Voss is going to take all the credit." I took the card automatically. It was thick, matte black stock. The logo was a stylized sun. Solstice Carry. They were our biggest competitor. They were the ones who had been eating into our market share for the last 2 years. "We should talk," the woman said, "before you sign anything with those people inside." "Who are you?" I asked. "I am Celia," she said, "and I am the one who actually reads the contracts." Before I could say anything else, the window rolled up, the electric motor hummed, and the car accelerated away, kicking up a small cloud of dust that settled on my shoes. I looked at the card in my hand. Then I looked back at the workshop, where Mateus and Inez were turning off the lights. I was standing in the middle of a dirt road in Portugal, holding the fate of my company in one hand and an offer from the enemy in the other. The wind picked up, rustling the eucalyptus leaves. It sounded like whispering. I put the card in my pocket, separate from the Bracken and Rowe receipts. I didn't know what it meant yet, but for the first time in years, I felt like a player in the game, not just a pawn. The vibration of my phone against the cheap laminate nightstand sounded like a drill. It was 3:15 in the morning in Lisbon. I knew who it was before I even opened my eyes. There was only one person in my life who treated time zones as a suggestion rather than a rule. I rolled over, my eyes gritty with exhaustion, and swiped the screen. "Status signed yet. Why is this taking so long?" It was Derek. He sent these messages in bursts. Usually when he was bored or feeling pressure from above, he treated me not like a senior coordinator navigating a complex international negotiation, but like a vending machine that had swallowed his dollar and refused to drop the candy bar. I sat up in the dark, the streetlights from the alley casting long, prison bar shadows across the bedspread. I typed back, my thumbs moving slowly. "We are building trust. Mateus needs to feel heard. We are reviewing the supply timeline tomorrow." The response was immediate. The 3 dots of his typing bubble appeared and disappeared rapidly. "I do not pay you for philosophy. Madeline, I pay you for ink on paper. Close it." I put the phone face down. The blue light faded, leaving me in the dark again. I could not explain to a man like Derek that in Portugal, business was personal. You did not walk into someone's house and demand dinner before you had even taken off your coat. He viewed human relationships as inefficiencies in the system. I viewed them as the system itself. The next day, the tension moved from the digital world to the physical one. We were gathered in the small conference room at the Rocha workshop. The air conditioner was broken, and Inez had opened the windows, letting in the sounds of the factory floor, the rhythmic thumping of the presses, and the high-pitched whine of the saws. Derek had insisted on joining via video call. I set up my laptop at the end of the table. Mateus sat opposite me, his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask of granite. Inez sat beside him, taking notes in a ledger. Derek's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his office in Chicago, looking fresh and caffeinated. The morning sun behind him created a halo that made him look manic. "So," he said, his voice booming through the tiny laptop speakers, distorting slightly, Are we ready to stop playing hard to get and make some money? Mateus. The room went dead silent. Mateus looked at the screen, then at me. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck that had nothing to do with the broken air conditioner. We are reviewing the final clauses regarding the delivery schedule. Mr. Voss, Mateus said, his voice low and controlled. Madeline and I have agreed on a realistic timeline that ensures quality. Derek laughed. It was a dismissive, barking sound. Realistic is a word for people who lack ambition. Mateus, look, I know how you guys operate down there. You like your siestas and your long lunches? I get it. Beautiful country. But we operate at an American pace. I need you to ramp up production by 30% in Q4. I froze. That was not in the agreement. We had spent 4 days agreeing that a 30% increase was impossible, without compromising the integrity of the cork composite. Derek, I said, trying to interject, we discussed this. The machinery cannot handle that load without overheating. Derek waved a hand at the camera, swatting away my concern like a fly. They can run a night shift. Just pay the overtime. Look, Mateus, let me teach you something about the global market. If you are not growing, you are dying. We are offering you a chance to play in the big leagues. Do not let small-town thinking get in the way of a big-time payout. I saw Inez close her ledger. The sound was soft, but it felt final. Mateus leaned forward. He did not raise his voice. Mr. Voss, my father built this factory. I have run it for 40 years. We supply 3 of the top luxury houses in Paris. We do not need you to teach us about business. We need you to understand that cork is a natural material. It requires respect. You cannot shout at a tree to grow faster. Derek rolled his eyes. I saw it clearly on the high-definition feed. Okay, spare me the poetry, Derek said. Madeline, just get the damn thing signed. I have a tea time in 20 minutes. The screen went black as he disconnected without a goodbye. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear a fly buzzing against the window pane. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to say that he was an idiot, that he didn't speak for me, that I hated him as much as they did. But I was wearing the Bracken and Rowe badge. His shame was my shame. Matthias stood up slowly. He looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. He is a wrecking ball, Matthias said. He looked at the blank screen with genuine disgust. He will destroy everything he touches because he does not understand the value of anything, only the price. I gathered my papers, my hands trembling. I will fix the timeline clause. Matthias, I promise. He won't see the final draft until it is exactly what we agreed on. Inez looked at me. Her eyes were not angry, but they were filled with a pity that was harder to bear than rage. Be careful. Madeline, she said, when a man like that starts breaking things, he makes sure the glass cuts someone else. I left the workshop feeling sick. When I got back to the hotel, my laptop pinged with a new email. It was from Kara Finch. Kara was a junior executive who sat 2 desks down from me in Chicago. She was 26, ambitious, and had a smile that she turned on and off like a light switch. We had always been cordial, but she moved through the office with the hunger of someone who wanted to be sitting in a corner office before she was 30. Subject helping out, hi Maddie. Derek mentioned you are swamped over there. He asked me to take a look at the formatting of the contract draft, just to make sure it aligns with the new legal templates. Send over the Word doc when you have a sec. We are all rooting for you. Kara. I stared at the screen. Why would Derek ask Kara to check the formatting? I had been writing contracts for this company for 5 years. My formatting was impeccable. And why did she need the editable Word document legal, usually reviewed PDFs to ensure track changes were locked? It felt wrong. It felt like someone trying to slip a key out of my pocket while hugging me. I typed a reply. Thanks. Kara, I am still finalizing the language with the vendors. I will send the PDF directly to legal when it is ready. I have it covered. I hit send. I knew that would annoy her. I knew she would go running to Derek, but I was not going to let anyone touch that document until Mateus had signed it. Then came the second notification. This one was a direct message from Derek. Madeline. Change of plans regarding the entertainment budget. I opened the message. I need you to categorize the dinner you had with the Rocha family as consulting fees instead of meals, and add a line item for relationship facilitation. Put it at $5,000. We need to move some budget buckets around for the quarter end. Just pay it on your hotel bill as a miscellaneous charge, and I will approve the reimbursement immediately. I stopped breathing. Relationship facilitation. That was not a budget category. That was a euphemism. And $5,000, I had not spent $5,000. I had spent €200 on a dinner of grilled sardines and green wine. He was asking me to invoice a phantom charge. He wanted me to pay the hotel perhaps for a room upgrade I didn't have. Or maybe he wanted me to withdraw cash and expense it falsely and label it as a fee. If I did that, I would be falsifying an expense report. I would be creating a paper trail for a bribe or a kickback. If an auditor looked at that, they wouldn't see Derek's instruction. They would see Madeline Lee charging $5,000 for relationship facilitation in a foreign country. It looked like embezzlement. It looked like I was pocketing the money. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the trap. The indemnity agreement I had signed, the vague language about personal liability, the pressure to use the card. He wasn't just trying to get the contract signed. He was moving money. He was trying to hide a deficit or pay off someone off the books, and he was using my employee ID to do it. If I refused, he would fire me for insubordination. He would say I was difficult and unable to follow complex financial directives. If I agreed, I committed a crime. I sat on the edge of the bed, the lumpy mattress sagging under my weight. I felt small. I felt incredibly far from home. I took a screenshot of his message. I saved it to my encrypted cloud drive. Then I opened the email app and forwarded the notification to my personal address. I did not reply to him. Not yet. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. I looked tired. I looked like a single mother who was running out of options. But I also looked like someone who had just realized she was being hunted. Mateus was right. Derek was a wrecking ball. But he wasn't just swinging wildly. He was aiming. And I was the wall he intended to smash to hide the cracks in his own foundation. I walked back into the room. I opened the mini-fridge and took out a bottle of water. My hands were steady now. The fear had crystallized into something sharp and cold. I would not add the fee. I would not send the file to Kara. I was going to finish this deal, but I was going to do it with my finger on the trigger of every piece of evidence I had. I sat down at the desk and opened the contract draft. I scrolled to the signature page. The cursor blinked next to my name. Key contact. It was the only shield I had left. I hoped it was strong enough. The lobby of the residential Estrella was quiet, save for the hum of the vending machine and the rhythmic tapping of the night manager's fingers on the counter. It was 11 o'clock at night. In my lap sat the heavy leather portfolio containing the final draft of the contract. Tomorrow was the day. After weeks of negotiation, exhaustion, and coffee that tasted like battery acid, Mateus Rocha was going to sign. I felt a rare moment of peace. I had done the impossible. I had bridged the gap between a soulless Chicago corporation and a proud Portuguese artisan family. I had saved the account. I walked up to the front desk. I needed to extend my reservation for one more night to cover the signing ceremony and the travel time to the airport. "Good evening," I said to the man at the desk. "I need to add tomorrow night to my stay. Please charge it to the card on file." He nodded, typing slowly. "Certainly. Ms. Lee." One moment, I watched him swipe the card. I waited for the receipt printer to chatter. Instead, a harsh beep cut through the silence. The terminal flashed red. He frowned and swiped it again. Another beep. "I am sorry," he said, looking up with a confused expression. "The system says the card is invalid. Do you have another?" "It must be a glitch," I said, forcing a smile. "It is a corporate Platinum American Express. There is no limit on it. Try entering the numbers manually." He did. The result was the same. Declined. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my spine. I reached for my phone to check the banking app. That was when the notifications hit me like a physical wave. The first was a text message from Derek. Contract terminated. Figure it out. Don't bother coming back to the office. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the words. Terminated, the deal was done. The papers were in my hand. Why would he terminate the contract now? Then I saw the second notification. It was an email from the Bracken and Rowe Security Department. Subject notice of internal investigation. Ms. Lee, effective immediately. Your employment is suspended pending an investigation into expense reimbursement fraud and misappropriation of company funds. Your access to all corporate accounts, travel booking systems, and communication channels has been revoked. Please surrender all company property. The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. Fraud. I understood it in a terrifying flash of clarity. The relationship facilitation fee. The $5,000 Derek had ordered me to hide in the hotel bill. I had refused to do it. I had not sent the invoice. But Derek must have found a way to flag the account anyway. He was pinning it on me. He was painting a narrative where I was the one inflating costs, where I was the thief. Ms. Lee, the receptionist said, his voice losing its warmth. If the card is declined, I cannot guarantee the room. In fact, the system has automatically voided your current check-in because the authorization hold failed. He looked at me with suspicion now. To him, I was no longer a business guest. I was a vagrant in a suit. You will need to provide a valid form of payment for the past 3 nights immediately, or I will have to ask you to vacate the premises. The police are very strict about theft of services. I checked my personal account again. $58. I could not pay. I looked at the date on the receptionist's computer screen. November 13th. The breath left my lungs. November 13th. Sadie's birthday was yesterday. I had been so consumed by the negotiations, by the time difference, by the constant barrage of Derek's demands, that I had missed it. I had not called. I had not video chatted. I had promised her I would be home. And not only was I not home, I had let the day pass without a word. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table with Megan, wearing her party hat, waiting for the phone to ring. I imagined the candles melting down into the icing of the unicorn cake while the phone remained silent. I had failed her. I had broken the one promise that mattered. A sob threatened to climb up my throat, but I swallowed it down. It tasted like bile. There was no time to cry. If I cried now, I would never stop. I looked down at the leather portfolio in my hand. Why? Why would Derek do this tonight? Why fire me hours before the signature? Then I realized the brilliance of his cruelty. He did not want me to sign that contract. He wanted the contract, but he did not want me on it. If I signed it tomorrow, my name would be immortalized on the document. I would be the hero who saved the supply chain. It would be harder to fire a hero. It would be harder to frame a hero for embezzlement, but if he fired me tonight, he could swoop in tomorrow. He could tell Mateus that I had been let go for ethical violations. He could present himself as the savior cleaning up my mess. He would get the signature, take the credit, and I would be left stranded in Lisbon with a ruined reputation and no way home. He thought he had won. He thought he had cut all my strings, but he had forgotten to read the fine print. I opened the portfolio. I turned to page 42, Clause 18.b. Key contact stipulation. This agreement is contingent upon the continued oversight and direct management of Ms. Madeline Lee. Any change in personnel regarding the primary liaison role requires written consent from Rocha Cork Works. Failure to maintain this assignment renders this agreement voidable immediately. Derek had never seen this version. He had only seen the drafts before Mateus insisted on the clause. He thought he was firing an employee. He did not realize he was shredding the very deal he was trying to steal. The receptionist cleared his throat loudly. Ms. Lee, I am going to have to ask you to settle the bill or leave. I have security on speed dial. I closed the portfolio. I zipped it up tight. This was not just a stack of paper anymore. It was my life raft. It was the only thing standing between me and prison. I am leaving. I said, I did not go back to my room to pack properly. I had my laptop bag and my small carry-on with me in the lobby because I had been working there. I left my toiletries upstairs. I left a pair of shoes. It did not matter. I walked out of the hotel into the Lisbon night. The air was damp and cold. The city that had looked so beautiful from the bus window now looked predatory. The shadows stretched long and dark down the cobblestone streets. I checked my phone. My company email was already locked out. My flight app showed the ticket as void. I stood on the corner, shivering in my trench coat. I had $58. I could buy a hostel bed, but then I would have nothing left for food or transport. And if Derek had reported me for fraud, who knew if the police were already looking for me at the airport? I could not go to the authorities. I could not go to the embassy. I was a suspect in a financial crime. There was only one place where I was not a criminal. There was only one place where I was still Madeline. I walked to the bus stop. The schedule said the last night bus to the industrial district left in 10 minutes. I tightened my grip on the portfolio handle. My knuckles were white. Derek Voss wanted to play a game of power. He wanted to crush a single mother under the heel of his Italian loafer. He thought I would curl up and disappear. I stepped onto the bus when it arrived. I paid the fare with trembling fingers. As the doors hissed shut, sealing me inside the dim yellow light of the cabin, I made a new promise. I could not fix Sadie's birthday. That moment was gone, lost to the altar of corporate greed. But I would not let them take anything else. I was not going to the factory to hide. I was going to the factory to load the gun. The porch light of the small house attached to the factory flickered on, cutting through the heavy darkness of the Portuguese countryside. When the door opened, Inez stood there wrapped in a wool shawl, her face etched with confusion that quickly dissolved into shock. I must have looked like a ghost, shivering in my trench coat, clutching my laptop bag as if it contained the nuclear codes. "I am so sorry," I said, my voice cracking from the cold and the shame. "I have nowhere else to go." They did not ask questions, not then. Mateus appeared behind his wife, took one look at my pale face, and ushered me inside. The house smelled of roasted chestnuts and old wood. It was warm. It was the kind of warmth that hurts when you have been out in the cold for too long. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on their floral sofa, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of lavender. Inez placed a bowl of soup in my hands. It was hot, thick with kale and chorizo. I stared at the steam rising from the bowl. I had not eaten since breakfast. They fired me. I said quietly. The spoon trembled in my hand. They canceled my cards. They canceled my flight. They accused me of fraud because I would not hide a bribe in my hotel bill. Mateus sat in the armchair opposite me. He listened to the whole story, his expression darkening with every sentence. I told him about Derek's demands, the fake fees, the silence regarding Sadie's birthday. When I finished, the room was silent except for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. Mateus stood up and walked over to where I had placed the leather portfolio. He unzipped it and pulled out the contract we had spent weeks agonizing over. He flipped to the signature page, his thick finger tracing the lines of text. "He thinks he is clever," Mateus said, his voice a low rumble. "He thinks he can cut you loose and then send someone else to collect the harvest." He looked at me, his dark eyes fierce, but he did not read the document. Madeline, or if he did, he was too arrogant to understand it. He tapped the paper. Clause 18, the key contact stipulation. It says that the agreement is valid only if you are the managing party. It says that any change in the liaison requires my written consent. I know. I said, but I am fired. Mateus, I am not the liaison anymore. Exactly, he said, which means there is no contract. There is no deal. Without you, this paper is just kindling for the fire. He dropped the contract back onto the table. You are not just the messenger. Madeline, you are the trade. He cannot have the cork without the woman he just left on the street. The realization hit me slowly. Derek had tried to erase me, but in doing so, he had erased the only bridge to the product he needed to save his career. I need to make a call, I said. I need to know where I stand legally, using their home Wi-Fi. I opened my laptop. It was 2 a.m. in Chicago. I called a friend of a friend, a labor lawyer named Sarah, who had helped me with a lease dispute years ago. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy. "Don't sign anything," Sarah said. her voice sharpening as she woke up and processed what I was telling her. Do not sign a resignation letter. Do not sign a severance agreement. If they sent you a termination notice, save it. Save the timestamps. Save the text messages where he told you to figure it out. He stranded you. Maddie, she continued, that is constructive dismissal at the very least, and reckless endangerment at the worst. If he is framing you for fraud, you need every scrap of paper to prove he gave the order. Do not delete anything. I hung up feeling a strange mixture of fear and adrenaline. I was not just a victim anymore, I was a witness. The next morning, the sun rose over the eucalyptus trees, casting long shadows across the factory yard. I had slept on the sofa. I woke up to the smell of strong coffee and the sound of a car engine outside. I looked out the window. It was the black electric rental sedan I had seen days ago. Celia Ward. I walked out onto the porch. Celia was standing by her car, talking to Mateus. She wore a crisp linen suit that looked immune to the dust of the road. When she saw me, she stopped talking. She did not look surprised to see me there in wrinkled clothes. I heard about the credit card. She said, word travels fast in this industry. Suppliers talk. Hotel managers talk. She walked up the steps. Up close, she looked even more formidable. She had the eyes of someone who played chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Bracken and Rowe are collapsing. Madeline, she said, Derek is scrambling. He sent an email to Mateus this morning claiming you had a mental breakdown and had been recalled for medical reasons. He is trying to send a junior associate out here to close the deal by Friday. I felt a surge of rage. A mental breakdown. He was gaslighting the entire situation. He is lying. I said, I know, Celia said calmly. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. I want to show you something. She unlocked the screen and opened a PDF file. This is a proposal Derek Voss sent to us 2 years ago, back when he was trying to jump ship and join Solstice Carry. He was trying to bring a few key vendors with him as a dowry to get hired. I looked at the document. It was a standard supply offer, but there were handwritten notes in the margins. Next to the pricing breakdown, someone had crossed out the standard broker fee and written a new number in jagged black ink. Relation fee, 10%. Route through consultancy firm, B. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Derek's. He does this every time. Celia said, he inflates the vendor cost, skims a percentage off the top through a shell company he calls a consultant, and pockets the difference. He tried to get us to agree to it. We declined. We do not do business that way. I stared at the screen. The relationship facilitation fee he had asked me to hide wasn't a one-time desperation move. It was his business model, and he was using me to legitimize it. If I had expensed that $5,000, it would have gone straight into his pocket, and I would have been the one with the dirty hands. He is using you as a shield, Celia said. He puts your name on the paperwork. He makes you process the payments. So if an audit ever happens, it looks like your incompetence, not his malice. I looked up at her. The anger I felt was cold and sharp. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want the cork, Celia said bluntly, and I want the person who secured it. She gestured to the factory behind us. Mateus trusts you. Inés trusts you. That is a currency you cannot buy. Solstice. Carrie wants to offer you a job. Madeline, Senior Procurement Manager, starting immediately. We will cover your legal fees, we will cover your flight home, and we will pay you what you are actually worth. It was the lifeline I had been praying for, a way home, a salary, a way to fight Derek with a major corporation behind me. But then I looked at Mateus. He was standing by the factory door, watching us. He looked tired. He had been fighting for this factory his whole life. If I left with Solstice, if I just took the job and ran, what would happen to him? Solstice was a competitor. They could squeeze him just as hard as Bracken and Rowe. I looked back at Celia. I am not signing with Bracken and Rowe. I said, that bridge is burned. Good, Celia said. Then sign with us. I will. I said, but I have conditions. Celia raised an eyebrow. You are in a difficult position to make demands. Madeline, you have $58 and a voided ticket. I have the vendor. I said, I pointed at Mateus. You said it yourself. He trusts me. If I tell him to sell to you, he will. If I tell him to wait, he will wait. And right now, you need this material to launch your summer line before Bracken and Rowe recovers." Celia smiled. It was a small, genuine smile. She respected leverage. "What are the conditions?" she asked. "First," I said, "you protect the workshop. I want a 5-year commitment, not the standard 2. I want a guaranteed floor price for the material that does not fluctuate with the market. And I want it in writing that you will never ask them to compromise the curing process for speed." Celia nodded slowly. "That is expensive, but acceptable. What else?" "Second," I said, "I want full transparency. No relationship fees, no consultants, no side deals. If I see one line item that looks suspicious, I walk, and I take every vendor I manage with me." Celia tapped the tablet screen, closing the file. "Done," she said. "We run a clean ship. Madeline, you will find that refreshing." I looked at the tablet, then at the factory, then at the empty road that led back to Lisbon and eventually to Chicago. "One more thing," I said. "Name it. I want a ticket home tonight." I said, "And I want a lawyer waiting for me when I land. Because I am not just going back to work. I am going back to clear my name. And I'm going to bring the whole house down on Derek Voss." Celia extended her hand. "Welcome to Solstice, Madeline." I shook her hand. It was firm and dry. I turned to Matthias. He was smiling. It was the first time I had seen him smile in days. He knew, just as I did, that the game had changed. I was no longer the victim stranded overseas. I was the architect of my own rescue, and I was coming home with an army. The phone in my hand buzzed with a persistence that felt manic. It was Derek. He had moved past the stage of commanding silence and had entered a spiral of panic. I sat in the passenger seat of Celia's rental car as we navigated the morning traffic toward Lisbon Portela Airport. I did not answer. I let the calls roll to voicemail, watching the transcription preview scroll across my screen. The first 3 messages were threats. "You are in violation of your non-disclosure agreement. Madeline, if you talk to anyone, I will sue you for every penny you do not have." Then, 10 minutes later, the tone shifted. "Look, let us be reasonable. Come back to the hotel. I will unlock the card. We can talk about this. You are overreacting to a standard audit procedure. By the time we reach the departure terminal," he was bargaining, "I can get you a raise. Madeline, 10%, retroactive to the start of the year. Just get Matthias to sign the original draft. I will drop the investigation. It was just a misunderstanding. I turned the phone off. A misunderstanding." He called fraud a misunderstanding only when the gun was pointed back at him. He knew now that without me, he had no deal, and without the deal, his quarter was ruined. But he did not know yet that I had already chosen a side, and it was not his. We walked into the terminal. Celia moved with the confidence of a frequent flyer, heading straight for the priority check-in. I followed, feeling the weight of the last 24 hours in my bones. I was wearing the same clothes I had worn yesterday, but I felt cleaner. The shame of being stranded was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of purpose. We approached the counter. Celia handed over her passport and pointed to me. "She is traveling with me," Celia said. "I booked the ticket an hour ago." The agent typed on her keyboard. She frowned. "Ms. Lee," she asked. "Yes," I said. "There is a flag on your profile in the Global Alliance system," the agent said, lowering her voice. "It was placed by your previous travel agency. It says, 'Do not board. Pending corporate investigation regarding flight payment dispute.' Derek." He had not just canceled my original ticket. He had reported me to the Travel Clearinghouse as a payment risk. He was trying to ground me. He wanted to keep me trapped in Portugal so I could not get back to Chicago to defend myself. Celia stepped forward. She did not raise her voice, but her tone dropped a few degrees. "That flag is from a third-party corporate account," she said. "This ticket was purchased with a private World Elite MasterCard, fully paid, unrelated to that corporate entity. If you deny boarding on a valid, paid ticket based on a dispute with a separate vendor, I will have my legal team on the phone with your station manager in 5 minutes. The agent hesitated. She looked at Celia's card, then at the screen. She typed a command code. "I will override it as a direct purchase." The agent said, "But I cannot link her frequent flyer number." "That is fine," I said quickly. "Just get me on the plane." We walked through security in silence. When we reached the lounge, I turned to Celia. "I need a piece of paper," I said. Celia looked at me. "For what?" "The ticket." I said, "It cost $2,000. You paid for it. If I accept it as a gift, Derek will claim I took a bribe from a competitor to sabotage his deal. He will paint it as corporate espionage." Celia nodded. She understood immediately. She pulled a notebook from her bag. I wrote it out in longhand. "Madeline Lee agrees to repay Celia Ward the sum of $2,000 for emergency travel expenses within 30 days. This is a personal loan, not a corporate benefit." I signed it and dated it. I took a picture of it. "Send me the invoice." I said, "I will pay you back the second my funds are unfrozen." Celia took the paper. "Smart." She said, "You really do keep the receipts." We sat down near the window. I opened my laptop. It was time to close the door on Bracken and Rowe. I looked at Mateus, who was still listed in my contacts. I sent him a text. "Do it now." 2 minutes later, a copy of an email landed in my inbox. Mateus had CC'd me. It was addressed to Derek Voss, the CEO of Bracken and Rowe, and the entire board of directors. "Dear Mr. Voss, effective immediately, Rocha Cork Works is ceasing all negotiations with Bracken and Rowe. We do not tolerate the abuse of employees, nor do we do business with partners who use financial abandonment as a negotiation tactic. The treatment of your representative, Ms. Lee, violates the ethical standards of our trade. We will be seeking other partners who understand the meaning of respect." It was a death blow. He had framed the rejection not as a business disagreement, but as a moral failure on Derek's part. He had copied the board. Derek could not hide this. He could not spin it as a pricing dispute. But Derek was not done. My laptop pinged. It was a notification from the shared document server. I still had view-only access on my personal device because the cache hadn't cleared. Document edited Cork Supply Agreement V4. Final. Edited by Kara Finch. I clicked on the notification. Kara was in the file. She was furiously deleting sections. I watched the cursor move in real time. She was highlighting Clause 18, the key contact clause that required my signature, and hitting backspace. She was trying to scrub my name. Derek must have screamed at her to sanitize the document so he could sign it himself. Send it to Mateus, and pretend the clause never existed. They were trying to forge the terms before Mateus could formally lock the file on his end. My heart raced. If they sent a signed version without my name, they could claim Mateus agreed to it verbally. They could muddy the waters. I called Mateus. "Mateus," I said, "they are altering the draft. Kara Finch is deleting the key contact clause right now. I see it." Mateus said. His voice was calm. "I am looking at the version history." "Lock it," I said. "Convert the version from yesterday, the one with my name, to PDF and password protected. Then reply to Kara's email stating that the only authorized version is the one time-stamped yesterday at 5 o'clock. "Done," Mateus said. "And Madeline Yesines says to bring the little one to visit next summer. When you are the boss." I smiled. A genuine smile that felt foreign on my face. "I will." I hung up. I watched the screen. A moment later, the document icon turned into a locked padlock. Kara's access was revoked. The cursor stopped blinking. I imagined Kara sitting in her cubicle in Chicago, pale and shaking as the screen went gray. She had bet on the wrong horse. She had tried to help Derek bury me, and now she was an accessory to attempted contract tampering. Boarding for Flight TP 201 to Newark is now beginning. The announcer said. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I had $58 in my pocket. My bank accounts were frozen. My career at the company I had given 5 years to was over, but I did not feel poor. I looked at Celia. "Thank you," I said. "See you in Chicago." She said, "Get a lawyer, a mean one." I walked down the jet bridge. The tunnel was cool and smelled of aviation fuel. For the first time in days, I was not thinking about how to survive the next hour. I was thinking about the meeting I was going to walk into tomorrow. Derek thought he had left a helpless woman in Lisbon. He thought he had cut my legs out from under me. He did not realize that by cutting the strings, he had set me free. I found my seat. I sat down and buckled the belt. The click was satisfyingly loud. I pulled out the leather portfolio one last time. I touched the paper inside. The evidence was safe. The contract was dead to Bracken and Rowe, but alive for me. As the plane accelerated down the runway, pushing me back into the seat, I closed my eyes. I was coming for them, and I was bringing the truth with me like a storm. The key turned in the lock with a familiar click, a sound I had been dreaming of for 3 days. I pushed the door open. The apartment smelled of stale air and the lavender laundry detergent Megan used. Mommy. The scream was high-pitched and shattered the heavy silence. Sadie launched herself off the sofa, her socks sliding on the hardwood floor. I dropped my bags, the suitcase, the laptop, the heavy portfolio, and fell to my knees just in time to catch her. She hit me with the force of a cannonball. I buried my face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her, feeling the solid, warm weight of her small body. She was shaking. I thought you were not coming back. She sobbed into my neck. The words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I pulled back to look at her. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and puffy. She looked older than 7. She looked like a child who had learned too early that adults could disappear. I am here, I said, my voice thick. I am right here. Sadie, I am never leaving you like that again. Megan stood in the doorway to the kitchen, holding a dish towel. She looked exhausted, her eyes sympathetic but worried. She waited up every night, Megan said softly. I held Sadie's face in my hands. I missed your birthday. Baby, I am so sorry. Sadie sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. It is okay, she whispered. I just wanted you. I made a new promise then. It was not a promise about cakes or presents. It was a promise that no job, no contract, and no man in a suit would ever make me a ghost to my daughter again. The peace lasted exactly 2 hours. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a courier knocked on the door. He handed me a thick envelope with the red logo of a major corporate law firm. I opened it at the kitchen table while Sadie watched cartoons in the other room. Notice of civil action and demand for return of property. They were accusing me of industrial espionage. The letter claimed I had stolen proprietary trade secrets, solicited bribes from a competitor, Solstice Carey, and was holding critical company documents hostage. They demanded the immediate return of the Rocha contract drafts and threatened a lawsuit for damages totaling $500,000. They were trying to scare me into handing over the evidence. They wanted the portfolio. I did not panic. Panic is for people who do not have a plan. I had passed panic somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. I picked up my phone. I took a photo of the legal threat. Then I opened my laptop and logged into a secure whistleblower portal that I knew existed but had never used. It was an external reporting system required by the company's insurance policy, monitored by a third-party ethics board. I uploaded everything. I uploaded the text messages where Derek told me to figure it out when I was stranded. I uploaded the email instructing me to falsify the relationship facilitation fee. I uploaded the screenshot of my frozen bank account and the voided ticket. I hit submit. By filing a formal whistleblower complaint, I had just triggered federal protection. If they fired me or sued me now, it would be considered retaliation. I had just turned their civil suit into a potential federal investigation. I need to go to the store. I told Megan, we are out of milk. I needed air. I needed to think. I drove to the supermarket 3 blocks away. I was loading a carton of almond milk into my trunk when a car screeched into the spot next to me. It was a silver Mercedes. I knew that car. It belonged to Kara Finch. I stiffened, gripping my keys like a weapon. Kara got out. She did not look like the polished executive assistant who had tried to erase my name from the contract. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing sweatpants, and her eyes were wide with terror. "Madeline," she gasped. I took a step back. "Stay away from me. Kara." She held up her hands. They were shaking. "He locked me out," she said. Her voice was trembling. Derek. He locked me out of the server this morning. He told HR that the formatting errors in the contract were my fault. He is saying I was the one who messed up the relationship with Mateus. I looked at her. The schadenfreude was tempting, but I pushed it down. You tried to erase my name. Kara, you were helping him frame me. I was following orders, she cried. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He told me if I didn't do it, he would fire me. He said you were going rogue. Maddie, please, he's going to ruin me. He is putting it all on us. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I downloaded his email archive before he cut my access. She said, I was scared. I wanted insurance. What is on there, I asked. She looked around the parking lot. Paranoid. Proof, she whispered. It is not just the kickbacks from the brokers. It is the quality. I frowned. What about the quality Derek ordered the factory in Vietnam to lower the resin content in the hard-shell luggage line, she said. He saved 40 cents per unit. He pocketed the difference through his shell company, but the lower resin content makes the shells crack in freezing temperatures. My stomach turned. We had been receiving customer complaints about cracked shells all winter. I had assumed it was a bad batch. Derek had blamed the baggage handlers, but it was him. He was sabotaging our own product to skim 40 cents off the top. That is why he needs the cork deal so bad. Kara said, he needs a new win to cover the losses from the recalls that are coming. I looked at the small silver drive in her hand. It was a nuclear bomb. Why give it to me, I asked. Because you are the only one fighting him, Kara said. She shoved the drive into my hand. Burn him, Madeline, please, before he burns us. She got back in her car and sped off, leaving me standing in the exhaust fumes with the evidence that would end Derek's career. My phone rang. It was Celia Ward. Madeline, she said, I have news. Bracken and Rowe has scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The shareholders are panicking about the Rocha announcement. They should be, I said, closing my hand around the USB drive. Derek is going to present a narrative that you went rogue and sabotaged the deal. Celia warned. He is going to ask the board for authorization to sue you into oblivion, and he is going to ask for a vote of confidence to find a new supplier. Let him try. I said, listen to me, Celia said. Her voice was serious. Solstice wants to bring you on board, but our legal team is worried. If you go public with this, Bracken and Rowe will drag you into arbitration. They will seal the records. They will pay you a settlement to shut up, and Derek will walk away with a golden parachute. That is how these things work. I know. I said, so just come to us. Celia said, bring the evidence. We will use it quietly to leverage the market. You don't have to fight this war alone. I looked at the supermarket sign buzzing overhead. I thought about the way Mateus had looked at me when he said, you are the trade. I thought about Sadie crying in my arms. If I settled quietly, Derek won. He would move to another company, destroy another supply chain, and ruin another single mother's life. I am not settling. Celia, I said, Madeline, don't do anything rash. I am not going to be rash. I said, I am going to be professional. I hung up. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the files on the USB drive. It was all there. The emails to the Vietnam factory, the invoices from a shell company called Voss Consulting Group, the directives to ignore quality control tests. I organized the files. I printed 3 copies of everything. I put them in the leather portfolio next to the Rocha contract. I laid out my suit for the next morning. It was navy blue, sharp, and immaculate. I went into Sadie's room. She was sleeping, clutching a stuffed rabbit. I kissed her forehead. Sleep tight, baby. I whispered, Mommy has one more meeting. I was not going to hide behind a whistleblower hotline. I was not going to let Solstice fight my battles. Derek Voss had invited the board to hear an explanation for the missing cork. I decided I would deliver it to them in person. I checked the time. The meeting was in 12 hours. I felt a cold, hard calm settle over me. I was walking into the lion's den, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the prey, I was the hunter, and I was bringing enough ammunition to level the building. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom on the 42nd floor were closed, but the sound of Derek Voss's voice seeped through the cracks. It was a confident baritone, the voice of a man who believed he was untouchable. I stood outside in the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of my navy blazer. Beside me, Sarah, the labor attorney I had hired with Celia's loan, gave me a sharp nod. "Ready?" she asked. I gripped the leather handle of my portfolio. Inside were the 3 copies of the evidence that Kara Finch had given me, along with the timeline of my abandonment in Lisbon. "I am ready," I said. I pushed the doors open. The conversation inside stopped instantly. 12 heads turned. At the head of the long mahogany table stood Derek. He was mid-gesture, pointing at a projection screen that displayed a graph with a sharp downward red line. "Ms. Lee," the chairman of the board said, peering over his glasses, "we were told you were currently unavailable due to a medical crisis overseas." Derek's face went pale, then flushed a deep, angry red. He stepped forward, blocking me from the table. "This is a private meeting," Derek snapped. "Security, someone call security. She is disgruntled and she is trespassing." I walked past him. I did not look at him. I walked straight to the chairman, a silver-haired man named Mr. Henderson, who had founded the company 30 years ago. "I am not having a medical crisis, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, "and I am not trespassing. I am a shareholder in this company via my employee stock options, and I am here to answer the accusations of fraud that were just presented against me." Sarah stepped forward and placed a business card on the table. "I am representing Ms. Lee," she said, "and before you authorize the security team to remove a whistleblower protected under federal law, I suggest you look at what she has brought." The room went silent. Mr. Henderson looked at Derek, then at me. "Sit down," he said. Derek sputtered. "Sir, this is ridiculous. She sabotaged the Rocha deal. She is trying to deflect." "Sit down." "Derek," Mr. Henderson barked. I opened my portfolio. I took out the first stack of papers. 3 days ago, I was stranded in Lisbon. I began. My corporate card was canceled without notice. My flight was voided. I was left with $58 and an instruction from Mr. Voss to figure it out. I slid the printout of the text message across the table. "Contract terminated. Figure it out. Useless." I slid the bank statement showing the freeze next to it. I was not fired for incompetence. I continued. I was fired because I refused to process a fraudulent invoice. I placed the email regarding the relationship facilitation fee in the center of the table. Mr. Voss instructed me to hide a $5,000 fee within my hotel bill, labeling it as a consulting expense. When I refused, he initiated an investigation against me to discredit my character before I could return to the United States. Derek laughed. "But it sounded brittle. That is a fabrication," he said. "She doctored that email. We can verify the server logs right now." I said, "But first, you should hear from the vendor you claim I alienated." I opened my laptop and placed it on the table. I had set up a conference link with Mateus Rocha. I hit the connect button. Mateus's face appeared on the screen, magnified by the boardroom's camera system. He looked stern. Beside him sat Ines, Mr. Rocha. Mr. Henderson said, "We were told you pulled out of the deal because Ms. Lee was unprofessional." Mateus shook his head. "That is a lie," he said. His voice filled the room. "We pulled out because Mr. Voss is a man without honor. He insulted my workers. He tried to bully us on price. The only reason we entertained this contract at all was because of Madeline Lee." Mateus held up a piece of paper. "We insisted on a key contact clause." He said, "We stated that if Madeline was removed, the deal was void. We did not do this to trap you. We did this because she is the only person in your organization who understands our product. When Mr. Voss fired her, he destroyed the agreement." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "They are colluding," he shouted. "She promised them a kickback. That is why they want her." I looked at Derek. It was pathetic. He was flailing. "Actually," I said, reaching for the second stack of papers, the ones from Kara's USB drive, "the only person taking kickbacks is you." "Derek," I slid the documents toward the chairman. This is a chain of emails between Derek Voss and a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands called Voss Consulting Group. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Derek froze. These emails show that for the past 2 years, Mr. Voss has been authorizing payments to this consulting group for broker fees that do not exist. I said, but it gets worse. I laid down the quality control reports from Vietnam. He has also been ordering our factory in Ho Chi Minh City to lower the resin content in our hard shell luggage by 12% to save 40 cents per unit. He has been pocketing the difference. That is why the shells are cracking. That is why our returns are up 200% this quarter. Mr. Henderson picked up the papers. His hands were shaking slightly. He looked at the invoices. He looked at the bank routing numbers. Then he looked at the chief financial officer at the end of the table. "Run this routing number," Henderson said. "Now." The CFO typed furiously on his laptop. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the projector fan. Derek was standing very still, his face shining with sweat. "It matches," the CFO said quietly. "We flagged a series of irregular payments to a third-party vendor last week during the quarterly audit, but we couldn't link it to an internal employee. The routing number on this invoice matches the suspense account we were investigating." The CFO looked up. "It is him." The energy in the room shifted instantly. It went from a meeting to a tribunal. "Mr. Henderson stood up. He did not look at Derek. He looked at the head of security who was standing by the door. "Escort Mr. Voss out of the building." Henderson said, "Take his badge, take his phone, and call the legal department. We are freezing his assets pending a criminal referral." Derek started to speak. "You cannot do this. I made this department profitable." "Get him out," Henderson roared. 2 security guards stepped forward. They took Derek by the arms. For a second, our eyes met. He looked at me with pure hatred. But beneath it, I saw the terror of a man who realized he had underestimated the person he considered a pawn. He had thought I was weak because I was a mother, because I was quiet. He forgot that the quiet ones are the ones who listen, and the ones who listen are the ones who keep the receipts. The doors closed behind him. Mr. Henderson sat down heavily. He looked at me. He looked tired. "Ms. Lee," he said, "we owe you a significant apology." He gestured to the empty chair where Derek had been sitting. "We will, of course, drop all internal investigations immediately. We would like to offer you the director position. Effective today, we will match whatever salary you think is fair. We need someone to salvage the Rocha deal." I looked at the empty chair. It was a powerful seat. It came with a corner office and a salary that would secure Sadie's future for 10 years. But I looked at the screen, where Mateus was still watching. I looked at the papers on the table. "I appreciate the offer." "Mr. Henderson," I said, "but I cannot accept." The room murmured. "I have accepted a position with Solstice Carey," I said. "They have agreed to my terms regarding vendor transparency and ethical sourcing. Mateus and Inez will be signing with them later today." I stood up. "However," I continued, "my attorney will be in touch regarding the settlement for wrongful termination, defamation of character, and the emotional distress caused to my family. I expect the severance package to be substantial enough to ensure that my daughter never has to worry about her mother coming home again." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. He knew he had no leverage. "Understood, Ms. Lee." I picked up my empty portfolio. I walked out of the boardroom. I walked past the receptionist who had ignored me for years. I took the elevator down to the lobby. When I walked out of the building, the Chicago wind hit my face. It was cold, but it felt clean. It didn't smell like stagnant office air or fear. I took a taxi to Sadie's school. I was 2 hours early, but I didn't care. I sat on the bench outside the playground and waited. When the bell rang and the doors opened, a flood of children in colorful coats poured out. I saw her immediately. She was wearing her pink backpack, looking at her feet. "Sadie," I called out. She looked up. Her face broke into a smile that was brighter than the sun. "Mommy." She ran to me. I caught her, swinging her around. "Are you done with work?" she asked. "I am done with that work." I said, "I have a new job. But first, we have a birthday to celebrate properly." That night, after the cake was eaten and the presents were opened, I sat by her bed. She was asleep, her breathing slow and rhythmic. The legal battle with Bracken and Rowe would take months, but Sarah said they would settle quickly to keep it out of the press. The check would be large, but money was just a tool. The real victory was the silence in my head. The anxiety was gone. The fear of Derek's emails was gone. I had walked through the fire. I had been stranded, starved, and accused, but I had not burned. I brushed a strand of hair from Sadie's forehead. People like Derek Voss think the world belongs to the loud and the ruthless. They think they can take whatever they want and leave the rest of us to clean up the mess. But they forget that the world is built by the people who show up, the people who do the work, the people who remember. I kissed her cheek. The cost of cruelty always comes due, and I was glad I was there to collect it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country and share your thoughts on Madeline's revenge. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to Boss Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder to never let anyone walk all over them.